Music. It's not just part of our daily lives, it's part of our wrestling fandom as well, and it has been for decades. That's where this show comes in. Music of the Mat, the podcast devoted exclusively to the music of pro wrestling, hosted by Andrew Rich. Hey, that's me. Each episode delivers a different topic with a variety of great guests, fun conversations, musical analysis, and of course, a heartfelt pun or two. New episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. Check out Music of the Mat only on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
For April 25th, 2024. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed. We're available on all podcast applications and catchers. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts, your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside with your other host, Case Lowe. And Case, I have one very Chicago, just within the Chicagoland specific question for you.
Okay.
How is everyone coping with Foxtrot and Dom just completely just evaporating?
Boy, tough week in the city. Tough weekend for people my age living downtown in high-rise apartments. Foxtrot and Dom's I would say like an artsier Starbucks is how I would describe Foxtrot. And Tuesday afternoon, they opened their doors at 10 a.m. or maybe even early, because they're a coffee shop. And around noon, unexpectedly, they closed down for good. And I know many people affected by that situation. A devastating week in the city. Not even the announcement of a possible new Chicago Bears stadium. And as we sit here, the possibility of Caleb Williams being a Chicago Bear, not even that can help people find hope and joy in Chicago this week.
You know, Kingsley, when we were up in Chicago over All Out, my fiance, the one thing that she was attracted to it, and I feel like I get a sense of this is a big thing for women in their early 30s, is she saw the Foxtrot. She's like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is the cutest thing ever. I'm obsessed with this. So how did I find out about this case? And I've been sitting on this nugget just dropping on you. And I found out about this immediately as soon as it happened. Kings DM'd me and said, Foxtrot closed down. How can this be? Because there's actually outside of Chicago, the number the expansion markets are into Texas. So they even shut down in Dallas and in Austin. But it was one of those things I was like, oh, wow, I have to drop this on Case immediately.
Yeah, because they rapidly expanded last year. And
there was talks about building one in Fort Worth. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, the unfortunate part is, our grocery stores here, Mariano's and Jewel Osco, if my memory serves me correct, they are trying to form some sort of merger, and I think that's held up in the court right now. Maybe I'm off base there, but I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. And it's, it's what happens with all these mergers. They merge, they go out of business, and then everything will be Amazon in 3 years. And it's just, I'm so, I got so existential about the Foxtrot closing, not because I go to Foxtrot. I've been there maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire life, but it's just another thing that is going away, and it will be replaced by one of those weird Amazon stores where they have facial recognition, and you don't have to pay for anything with the card. They'll just charge it to your Prime account, and we'll all die in about 25 years due to climate change. So that's what Foxtrot closing did to me.
Yeah, it's just further accelerating 2049. But speaking of looking off into the distance, this episode of Open the Voice Gate, we're going to talk very little about this week in Dragongate because we will be having a special episode coming out this weekend. The two of us with voice of Dragongate, Jay Church, we'll be getting together talking about the path ahead. But Kate, there was one big thing out of the doubleheader from Kobe Arts Center that happened this weekend, and it was the main event of the April 21st show. That was really a very kind of fitting thing for us, but as we were doing Dragongate 25 stuff this week. This match felt really like almost straight out of it in its own way.
Yeah, the two Kobe shows this weekend, it's not Ensemble Hall, which is unfortunate. They're in that backup Kobe venue, which I understand is a little bit of an eyesore. But the 420 show had Hyo versus Kamei, which I went 4 stars on. I thought Jason Lee versus KZ in the main event was really strong. And quite honestly, everything on that 420 show was better than expected. It all just kind of had a good feel to it. I liked the flow of that show. It was really enjoyable. The 421 show, I don't think was as consistent, but also nothing even came close to what I went 4.5 stars on. The 8-man tag main event, Hyo, Monte, Kamei, and KZ versus Z-Brats of Valletta, Ishin, Jason, and Shun Skywalker. This was a hotly contested match, and if I wasn't already what I would label maybe a 9.5 or even 10 out of 10 excited for Dead or Alive, this would have certainly upped my excitement level, because I thought this was a terrifically heated 8-man and just all in all a really, really great match.
Yeah, it was something where you had the Technico and heel sides, and you start off with basically the first 5 minutes where they don't get into the ring. Yeah, like
it's a lot of crowd brawling.
It's a lot of crowd brawling, basically up until like the 5-minute call, and then
but I sorry to cut you off, but I also, it was justified crowd brawling. It didn't feel like it was of the Jeff Jarrett universe. Monte jumps Valletta during his entrance, so they're obviously on the floor there. We've seen every time Kamei and Jason have interacted with one another since the heel turn that those guys spill to the floor. They like brawling on the outside. KZ and Skywalker paired off, and then it was Hyo and Ishin. And it all felt very justified. It all felt very heated. And then, at the 5-minute call, like you were just about to say, things got back into the ring, and then from there, man, this felt like classic Dragon Gate action.
Yeah, and it's something where you get to see at this time we're full unit shuffle season at this point. Like other stuff, like the other main events happening on the weekend, we saw the exhibition debuts of the Future Kids, and the new veteran army has gained another member of Kagatora. But really, the way that they've focused onto the 5-way steel cage survival as well as the Dreamgate match coming up at Dead or Alive in Aichi on the 5th. It's just pretty remarkable the way that they've found, like, as we've talked about in recent weeks, this used to be such a kind of painful time of the year and time of the calendar where everything's already set up for Dead or Alive. The show's is in 10 days, and really they have all these shows to do. It used to be such a drain right when getting into the cage, a lot of Road to Dead or Alive stuff. That's not the case this year, and it's something where I think you look at the way that they've been able to kind of mold what's been happening with Monte and Johnny and be able to pull that into the overall steel cage warfare. Then you have Ishin around there, because Ishin is kind of become the weird super base for Monte throughout this.
Yeah, no, Ishin's looked awesome. I mean, I really like the work he's doing. I understand he's sort of the odd man out in terms of the Z-Brats guys on the Dead or Alive show. I wish he was getting a little bit of a bigger spotlight just because of the work that he's been doing. But yeah, you saw this all come together, and I always joke that, they do the 2 shows in Kyoto right before Dead or Alive, and those are the 2 Dragon Gate shows every year that I just do not watch because of the scheduling of them, and it's just a pain in the ass. But this match already felt hot, felt like they had momentum going into this show, and then you look at what they're doing on those Kyoto shows, and there's the KZ and Kame versus Big Hug versus Jason and Valletta 3-way tag match on the 3rd. And then the 4th, they're doing the random draw style match they did with RED and Masquerade a few years ago in Corkin, where they're going to draw pairs, lottery by both sides, 1 through 4, and then have a little gauntlet match there. And that sounds awesome. They are keeping the momentum rolling. Whereas normally, like you said, we get a cool Dead or Alive match announcement, but then the Road 2 stuff there is a bit of a pain to get through. Not this year.
Yeah, and I really like the format of, okay, the gauntlet starts with a 5-minute sprint, then you have the matches have elevated times as it goes throughout. I think that is a lot of fun, just because, like, in a way, like the easy thing would be going like, okay, you could do Johnny versus Hio there and just do a 5-minute thing and get through that. But I'm on the other hand, I'm like, what would be a KZ and Ishin 5-minute sprint look like? Like
exactly. Well, yeah, that's a great point. It feels like that's one of those where you want Ishin and Valletta in there early. Get those guys the shorter matches and see what they can do in a sprint.
Mm-hmm. And it's something where I look at the rest of the stuff that's coming up for the next weekend, and it's not that things aren't really necessarily happening on the rest of those shows. It is something where we have kind of these nucleuses of the new veteran army teaming up, basically, and we'll probably see a couple more guys getting added to it. I would not be surprised if, like, the out of, well, not the Yamato and Susumu match, because they're going against Team Muscle. Yamato has to beat up Kota Minoura a little bit this week, but it does kind of feel like that outside of like the lead up to Natural Vibes and Big Hug and Z-Brat stuff. That is the rest of the shows is just fun little matchups like Genki and Kanda versus Team Muscle, something that I can get into a little bit.
For sure. No, I'm very into this. I started thinking as I was watching the 421 main event, and again, this match just built over 17 minutes into, again, what I thought was a 4.5-star match. I am trying to think, since 2020, if there has been a show in the lead up that I have been this excited about, and there's really only, I guess, 1 or 1.5, kind of depending on how you want to count this, that even comes close. And that would be Kobe World 2021, because you not only, of course, had the Yoshino retirement, but I was also really into the Dreamgate stuff that weekend with Shun and KZ and Yamato. And I don't think there's been anything that I've been this excited about since that.
I think maybe for me, the show before that, because I when you brought up the point, I was like, oh, Kobe World Weekend 2021 would be mine. But Final Gate 2020 with Benkei versus Shun Skywalker, and then the RED versus Toryumon Generation Loser Must Disband match.
That was a big one.
That I felt pretty similar about, because those were two big, heavy matches happening that felt like, especially with the way that Shun Skywalker coming back from Excursion and then stepping into the late Kobe World, winning the title, his first title defense, like happening that soon after. It just felt like, okay, now we're kind of seeing like the two guys that were on the same side and how things were so different. Now, 3 years later, Shun's a completely new man. Benkei is still kind of, in a way, he was reestablishing himself at that time. And and then you had, of course, what happened in that match. But it's something where, like, looking up and down the Dead or Alive card, it does, like, even though for a show that might be a little bit late in the number of matches, everything on it basically, I would say, starting from 4 on and then through the title match, Steel Cage Survival, I've been as up for that as I've been for anything in recent memory in Dragongate.
It feels as hot as anything they've had, and obviously, it's tough to compare this to Final Gate 2020 just in terms of the crowd reaction, because
sure,
they weren't making any noise in 2020. But this, like I said, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they timed the Jason turn just right, and they have executed it, I think, so right every step along the way that all of a sudden you have this Jason thing that is rising. You have this palpable energy with Kamei. You have, when you bring in Strong Machine J into the fold, okay, you've got the State of Natural Vibes, but then also you've got Big Hug, who obviously really wants Kamei and everything there. I think Shun Skywalker just continues to elevate his game. That unit, obviously with the help of Jason, but then you look at the way Ishin's improved and the way Valletta's come along, and you just imagine if they had Yoshiki Kato in there as well. It's like, okay, I've always been a huge fan of Z-Brats. In 2023, I do think there was a time where they were, not as great as they could have been. But now you got a heel unit that's back on fire. You've got this Team Veterans thing that's happening. It's all really, really exciting. And then you think, okay, well, Junior's going to come back into the fold, and Tien Revolution could be back at any moment, and Minorita looks like he's really close to coming back. Kaito Nagano, we'll see. Maybe we'll get him by the summer. There's just a lot of things, a lot of paper cuts they took last year, small little step backs, it looks like they might finally be able to get ahead of all of those. And, I haven't written a Dragongate preview. I obviously do all the reviews for voicesofwrestling.com, unless Mike pitches in and helps when I can't do it, which is always greatly appreciated. But I haven't done a written preview for the website in quite some time. But I am doing a written preview that will be up at voicesofwrestling.com early next week, because I have so many thoughts on this show, and I think it's really important for Dragongate, and this is obviously not their top business priority, but I think with the state New Japan's in, I think with the state that Noah's in, the fact that All Japan is still good, but let's be honest, they've cooled since the start of the year. It's not like this Champion Carnival is the 1994 Champions Carnival.
They got obsessed with horse heads.
Yeah, boy, I see, and I'm behind on All Japan right now, so I just saw the screenshot of that 2 days ago, and I was like, oh boy, I gotta read up on what's going on here, because I am not familiar with this storyline. But it feels like there's an avenue for Dragongate to maybe win back some attention in the English-speaking market, and it can happen with this show. And I think they've done the right thing. So if you're listening to this, because we're obviously going to pivot to classic Toryumon content here in just a second, but if you're listening to this as a lapsed fan, I have a list on my Twitter of the recommended Ray Day Parejas matches I would watch, and then I would watch this main event from 421, and that will really introduce you, outside of Strong Machine J, who I would think a lot of people would know just because of his look. That match will introduce you to all the key players right now.
And it's something if you want to look at it as a new fan coming aboard at this time, if you hold off for 5 days and sign up on May 1st, you get essentially about 5 shows on the network in 6 days, and 2 or 3 of them have English commentary. Like and you get the Kyoto shows with that fun, the fun Gauntless match, and then Corkin's next Wednesday is on the 9th. So like it's a lot of stuff happening all of a sudden, because they have a run that goes basically Corkin, Ideon Arena 2, and Sambo in the same week. So May is a heavy month for Dragongate, and it does feel like in a lot of ways they're kind of hitting on all cylinders in a way that entering the hot period we haven't seen, at least, especially as you said, like looking at what happened last fall and then into the spring. It's nice to see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we will have a full preview with Jay that'll hit the feeds on the normal Open the Voice Gate upload day, maybe even a day earlier. Maybe we'll put it up on Tuesday morning instead of Wednesday morning. I will have a written preview up at some point, and then barring unforeseen circumstances, I will be watching Dead or Alive live. I'll be tweeting thoughts at the Open the Voice Gate account, and then we will come on here next Tuesday and talk everything Dead or Alive. I am very, very excited about it.
It's the hot season. We're getting into that. But Case, it's almost the end of April, and as we have said for Dragongate 25, we're reviving the Rewind and Rewatch series this year, picking special topics, some of them are representing each month. And I think now is time to get into our April topic Case, El Numero Uno 2004, aka the Dragongate Kingdom.
El Numero Uno 2004 is the topic this week. You and I went sort of back and forth on what we wanted to do here, because throughout the history of this show, and specifically this year, we've talked plenty about January 31st, 1999, and the Toryumon landing and how this promotion came to be, everything that led up to it, and then the initial kickoff. In February, we did the story of Mochizuki contra Mochizuki, which really took us from mid-2000 through early 2002, when we talked about when Toryumon really came into its own as a promotion. Over the course of the last few years, especially last year with it being the 20-year anniversary, we've spent a lot of time talking about 2003, and specifically El Numero Uno 2003, which is the night that Genki Horiguchi, took the backslide from heaven and became a star. He's still living off of that one night 21 years later. But when I start to think about all the things that I want to accomplish with Dragongate 25 in audio and ideally written, although as I was, talking to Mike about some things going on in my personal life beforehand, I have just not had the time to sit down and write written content the way that I would have liked, which is frustrating. I will work on that as we go throughout the year. But, I really want to tell the tale of different periods of time in a promotion that is constantly changing and constantly evolving. And as I thought about it, Mike, we have really never spent time talking about 2004, either the Toryumon side of it or the Dragongate side of it, 2004, despite being the most pivotal year in company history due to the split, is largely a forgotten and seemingly inessential and forgetful year for the company. And so I'm curious, when I talk about 2004 Toryumon, what is the thing that comes to mind for you? What's your vision? Who are the guys you think of? Do you think of it positively, negatively? What's on your mind?
Well, at least for me, I could say that when I think about 2004, I am not thinking about El Numero Uno 2004. I'm thinking about July 4th, 2004. I'm thinking about what was called the 6th Anniversario show, although it was really the 5th one. And then the next day, the famous press conference announcing the Dragongate Toryumon split. And then really, when you're talking about that, you're talking about promotion that essentially half of the calendar year was leading up to this split, and then the other half of it was like, all right, we're on our own now. How are we going to define ourselves? How are we going to spend out the rest of this year? And what you see at this time, and it's kind of fascinating in one way, and it's some of the things that there are things about 2004 that I'll be bugging people about into their later years to see if I can find out more and more about the inner workings of this year. You have this complicated time where essentially you have, in a way, a changing of the guard for one major figure. And then you also have at the same time the fact that you have at a brand new heel army that the company does not really know how to handle. It's not consistent. We've talked a lot about Aagan Iisou and the way that they kind of go about and the way that they end up. But El Numero Uno, and especially the first half of 2020 or 2004 leading up to the split, very much was the era of Aagan Iisou front and center.
Yeah, and that's really what I want to do here is when you think about, okay, we told the story really of Ultimo Dragon in January. In February, we were glossing over a lot of different things that happened when we did the Mochizuki contra Mochizuki story, because I want to tell the story of M2K. Last month, we focused so much on Naruki Doi and Blood Generation, and not necessarily on Ryo Saito and his main event Rise or anything else happening in the company at that time. And this podcast will largely serve as a vessel here to tell the story of Aagan Iisou, because they are a fascinating unit, and that Mike, tell me if you disagree, but I think when people think of heel units in Dragon Gate, they think Blood Generation, they think Blood Warriors, and it's probably a race between Aagan Iisou and Mad Blanky for that third spot, just in terms of infamy and notoriety.
I think in a lot of ways, who your third spot ends up being, it kind of tells what era you were most into the promotion.
Yes.
in that way that like Mad Blanky or Berserk might end up getting that third spot for someone who got in during the Ustream days into the Dragon Gate network. Whereas if you're someone who was a trader and you were getting your Vamanos Amigos and you were waiting to see like, okay, where are we getting clips from Mexico this month? You probably were thinking about like how it went from Crazy Max to M2K to a little bit of Italian connection, but really into this group that starts off in 2003, but by 2004 is now known as Aagan Iisou. And the way that I would say that the company transitions from the first generation of like these power heels into this brand new one out of the pieces of T2P and of the Italian connection.
And it's funny, Jay tweeted something out this week that I actually think really ties into this episode, because the start of Aagan Iisou, or really Hagure Gundam, which is what they were before they were anointed Aagan Iisou, to me, that is the end canonically of Toryumon. August 30th, 2003, the infamous four-way trios match. If somebody was going to come up to me, which they have many times via DM and gone, I want to get into Toryumon, what do I watch? I would start them with January 31st, 1999, and I don't know if I would recommend anything past August 30th of 2003. I bring up Jay because earlier this week he tweeted that he really wants to do English commentary on Magnum versus Milano from December 16th, 2003, and he calls that the Toryumon series finale. I'm curious, when you think about the entity and the machine that was Toryumon, do you have a specific end date that is more metaphorical than the literal July 4th, 2004 end date?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that the Yoyogi Gym show with Magnum Tokyo defending the Ultimo Dragon Gym Championship against Milano Collection AT very much kind of feels like the way that Magnum had his last real big rival in that way. And he was able to put down the young generation one last time. And after that, things changed near immediately into 2004, and especially how things changed rapidly with the heel units with that. And I think that there is something to really be said about that. And especially if you want to treat that whole entire week as when we get into the timeline, there are a lot of things happening right before Christmas in 2003, and particularly around this Yoyogi Gym show that tie up things neatly in a bow. I would also say like another place in another show that in a lot of ways felt like a season finale was this El Numero Uno 2004 final show.
Completely, because off the top of my head, I could not tell you a thing that happens in May or June of 2004. It really, 2004 is such a blind spot for me. I had never seen this show in full. I think I had seen Kondo versus Dragon Kid before, but I treated everything I watched on this show as being new. I watched a bunch of 2004 TV that led up to this show. I had never seen any of that before. And I think part of the reason is not even necessarily the quality of those shows or of some of these matches, but 2004 Toryumon has the same feel aesthetically, not in presentation, although it comes dangerously close sometimes, but aesthetically, it has the same feel as 2000 WCW when they changed to the silver logo, and it feels like, some of the guys that had been stars now feel out of place. Some of the new guys they try to push don't take. Now, of course, there's still a massive difference in quality, but Toryumon is a comfort blanket. You can put on Vamonos Amigos from the end of 99 or the middle of 2001 or the beginning of 2003, and it all feels largely the same. And then you get to 2004, and I don't know if you feel this way, but it's jarring on the eyeballs to watch this stuff and think like, wait a minute, this is the same promotion that the Italian Connection a year prior felt like the coolest thing on earth. This is the same promotion. Like, this is crazy, Max. What is happening here?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good kind of point to kind of getting into like the specifics of that time case, because so many things are happening at this time. Weirdly enough, what this kind of feels like to me, this time period as we're talking about it? Summer of 2018.
Mike, this was going to be my next talking point, is I think, the other reason we don't talk about 2004 is, again, it's largely the most inessential year and really just sort of a down year for the promotion. The only other year I can compare it to is 2018. That's exactly it. I don't have any desire to really go back and look at the 2018 stuff because, like,
I would go back and rewatch the beginning of Pac's run in Dragongate back then, but that's it.
Yeah, it's odd the way these years line up, right? Because 2003 is a pretty infamous year in Dragongate because of El Numero Uno, because of the four-way trios match, and because that promotion feels like they just have a ton of stars that year, even if, in all actuality, 2003 is a really up and down year. It peaks very high, but it has some dreck that year.
Toryumon X was 2003.
Exactly. In 2017 is a year that I don't think you or I look back on very fondly, but then you start to think about, it's like, well, they had Yamamura, and then there was some Mochi stuff at the end of the year. Oh,
when Mochi got the belt, it was pretty good.
Yeah, but it's like, there were some tag matches I liked that year, and it's the same thing as 2003. And then for both of those eras, a year later, it's just like, ugh, okay, all right, let me parse through this a little bit. It doesn't feel like the promotion that I loved. And for some people, 2004, they never got on with the brand change, and they fell off there. And I talk to people routinely who, even if I think the promotion current day is so much stronger than it was in 2017, so much stronger than it was in 2018 before or after the split, they're still just like, well, it's just, I don't know. I liked when Shima was on the shows. It's just not the same. And it's like, well, it's pretty good. It's like, no, it's not the same. And I think both of these years, 2004 and 2018, have that same battle.
And part of that is that while, the on-screen stuff, it feels very weird, it's representative of what was going on behind the scenes and what was happening at the time. And really, a lot of people kind of deciding what direction they were going to go. Are you going with us? Are you going here? Are you looking into this live door money? Are you looking into this China money? It's one of those things where the company, it feels like, and it maybe is not necessarily a generational thing, but it does feel like every 10 years or so there is a massive like cyclical shakeup, and I guess almost like a energy dump in a way. Like all the emotion gets out and people go their separate directions, and then things kind of get back to normal. And it also is reflected on what happens on screen.
Well, this is one of my arguments for Dragongate a lot of the time, is that our perception of time has drastically changed, but you think about it, this is now a promotion that has been around for 25 years and has largely been very healthy for 25 years. And we talked about in February when we did the M2K stuff, this promotion, maybe it lasts for a number of years, but it doesn't thrive the way they did if they don't time the M2K thing just right. And then if they don't nail the transition, and really specifically in January 2005 is when they did, but it's another promotion that could have fallen by the wayside in 2006 or 2007. They had a real hard time creating stars at the end of the 2010s. And if Shima and Mochizuki weren't the physical specimens that they are, maybe by 2012, the promotion would not be doing as well as it did. And then post OWE split, that could have killed the promotion. And they just continue to rebound. And you have to think about all of the changes that, say, All Japan or New Japan made from 1972 until 1997. That's the same length of time we're talking about here. And you think about the transitions and you think about the ups and downs. Again, normally I talk about the passage of time where people I don't think they grasp, hey, think about how good Dragon Kid has been for 25 years, or Susumu has been for 25 years. But in this case, it's the promotion as a whole where we're talking about, hey, 2004 is a dip, 2018 is a dip, maybe 2023 to some wasn't the best year ever, but it's been remarkably consistent now for 25 years.
And it's something that I wonder when we talk about how Dragongate in particular gets treated differently. I think that's a fair way to say it without me coming across as aggressive or dismissive of people's perspectives. People treat Dragongate differently than they treat All Japan, New Japan, Pro Wrestling, Noah. And
yes, in terms of the Japanese press, in terms of the hardcore American fans, yes, 100%.
I mean, let's be frank, amongst American and Western tastemakers too.
Yes, oh my God, yes. And I've always been confused, not to get off on a tangent or cut you off, but nobody can explain the difference of well, I like Michinoku Pro and I like Osaka Pro and even early Toryumon's fine, but I don't like Dragongate. I was like, well, wait, hold on, what's the difference? I'm still at a loss on that front.
And if it's a case where we talk about people who have their guys, I know that, just speaking of myself, my relationship with Dragongate changed in November in 2016, personally. My guy's gone and is somehow still gone in a way. And it's just one of those things that, I do understand it from that standpoint. But when you talk about, the passage of times, Dragongate now at 25 years, the Dragon system at 25 years, in the mid 90s when everything was going crazy about Inoki's retirement, that's what you're talking about, the passage of time for where New Japan was in their lifespan in their first 25 years. And the fact that other than it's just treated differently if it's recency, the fact that it's a company that, not to I'm not calling him out, I'm just using him as an example here. Someone like Joe Lanza very much grew up during, and his wrestling fandom started before Dragongate existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you talk about people, and especially with how, I guess this is the one time I can kind of pull my old man card out for you, Case. Just like the fact of like people who were around in the early 2000s wrestling internet, it still was very much like a new thing that was not directly kind of marketed towards the Western internet, wrestling internet, in a lot of ways. Whereas at that time you had like Wondrous and Weird stuff, you had Bati Bati, and that was the kind of thing that I think that a lot of the wrestling internet at that time was drawn towards. It was, especially in comparison to what Dragon Gate would have to do in 2004 through 2006 in solidifying their fan base, which is completely different than what the fan base of a lot of the people who are on the internet at that time, frankly, or the stuff that they're watching, what their fan bases are that's targeting to as well. And I feel like that colors things. And I don't even know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't say that to be a bad thing. I just think that Dragon system recency does kind of pay a fact that for a lot of us, our wrestling fandom, if you're someone of my age and older, has existed throughout the existence of a Dragon system.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I want to get to the timeline here, but you said something in that reminded me of something that I actually want to start the show with, and then I forgot about it. So we're going to take a brief aside here, because I have a completely different thing to talk to you about that I want to do right now, a half hour into the show.
It's not about how I got jobbed at the Rangers game last night.
No, it's not. That's we'll save that for a different episode.
the VoiceGate Patreon right there.
I'll save that for a different episode. How often, because I think about it often, how often do you think about the fact that Will Ospreay worked the final 2 Dragongate UK shows, allegedly, and I confirmed this through a third party this week, made a great impression on the Dragongate office, but Dragongate didn't bring him over to Japan? How often do you think about what Will Ospreay would have been like in Dragongate had they pulled the trigger on that move?
I mean, in a way, he's living in his best universe, but
yes,
like at the same time, for the kind of wrestler and wrestling mind that he's been, I think it would have been a very interesting kind of thing. I don't know necessarily, knowing what we know about Will Ospreay and what he's kind of open about and all of that, I don't know how well that would have worked with the Dragon Gate office at that time.
That is true. 2015 Ospreay is a very different animal than 2024 Ospreay.
Right.
Whereas, like, now he could go over there and I would, like, okay, he's mature enough, he would get it. But
I mean, it's also like the company in of itself. Like, I mean, he would have been kind of like a pawn in like a Shima proxy war, you know? And at that kind of age, like, I don't know if that's a good thing for someone like that.
No, I mean, that's why I brought this up. That's great analysis. I think you're exactly right. And look, I'm not... He made the right decision. We all watched him versus Danielson a few days ago, and it's still, to me, one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And I start looking at my greatest wrestler ever list, and it's like,
yeah, we have to get together with Alan over the next 24 months and get these things together.
We do, because I'm like, well, he's probably better than Yoshino. He's probably better than Benoit now. Is he better than Ricky Steamboat? I love Steamboat. Is he better than him? All of a sudden it's like, well, there's Shima and there's Ibushi. Is he better than those guys? And it's not an immediate yes or no. But then I also think it's like, oh, well, man, I would have liked to have seen him in Summer Adventure Tag League 2016. And I would have liked to have seen what he would have become.
Member, like you see him as like an assistant member of Monster Express at that time.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what he would have probably come in, because this is when Ricochet's really leaving, when Ricochet is going to New Japan
2014,
full-time.
No, he was still full in Dragon Gate. 2016 was really that, like, things started to splinter at the end of 2014 with all the Lucha Underground stuff too.
That's right. So, yeah, I mean, you're...
A possible podcast coming down the line as well.
A Lucha Underground podcast?
No, Ricochet.
Oh, I was like, not with me, it's not. I'm not doing that. I have a podcast pitch for you after the show. I promise you it's not Lucha Underground. It's just something I think about a lot. And I reached out to somebody who would know a few days ago, and I was like, man, what was the deal with Ospreay? I heard maybe they made him an offer. I heard maybe Dragon Gate didn't have the money. Do you know what the deal was there? And the thing I heard was like, they were in love with him, and he obviously really respects Dragongate, but maybe they just felt like they still had Ricochet at that time, and that Uha was still there, and maybe they just didn't need another guy. But that is a really fun sliding glass door moment because it changes everything. It's the, I always reference DDT and Omega wanted to bring the Young Bucks over in 2012, but DDT could only afford one plane ticket from California. So the Bucks never went over. A year later, they're in the Bullet Club. That changes all of wrestling. All of wrestling history if they go to DDT in 2012.
And if you think also 2014, Rise of Flamita too.
Yeah.
Like you had, in a way, if we're talking 2014, they had Will Ospreay at home.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, but it is one of those fascinating sliding doors moments. Absolutely. And yeah, I always forget that he was on those shows. Like the weird thing, it's like on the last DGUSA shows, you had FTR Hair on a couple of those.
That was such a fun discovery.
Hey, he still has the same wild man instincts as we saw on Sunday night, man.
Yeah, it's just to put a bow on this. Ospreay worked those last two shows. UKX, it was him versus Tozawa in a singles match, and then
oh gosh,
I know, we gotta find the footage on that, and then the last Dragongate UK show, which was Yamato versus Yokosuka 2, he worked the opener. It was him and Swan and Uha and Lion Kid in a 4-way opener, and then Hulk versus Yoshino, Shima versus Doi, Haskins versus Marty Skrull, which I'll probably skip past that one, Yamato versus Susumu, and then Tozawa versus Ricochet as your main events.
Yeah, Dragon Gate UK was always one of those things that you're just like, oh, there were those things, especially like wrestlers like Lion Kid was like I only know of because of Dragon Gate UK.
I only know of because of Dragon Gate UK, and I am unaware of any possible Lion Kid scandals that may have occurred. I hope he's clean, but if he's not, I didn't know.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's heard of apparently Lion Kid did work in February. So
I see some pretty sporadic bookings from 2020 to 2022, which makes me a little nervous. Like maybe he was going into hiding.
yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's one of those things you're like, oh, you went away here. And then I'm looking at this. I just want to read this one thing here because this tag team that he went up against sounds fantastic. Ant Ladash and Hitman for Hire.
Hitman for Hire is the ring name?
That is the person's ring name. Now that is, yeah.
That rocks.
Previously known as Big Will.
This is like Chikara UK, Ant Ladash and Hitman for Hire. Those sound like Quack guys.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a show in Suffolk. I don't know what goes on there.
WWW Community Chaos 5 World War Wrestling. I'm completely unfamiliar.
The world of wrestling never stops.
I wish in the UK it would. Anyways, Mike, we have a timeline to get to here. A very short timeline is, again, I want to tell the story of Aagan Iisou here. So that begins August 30th, 2003, where after the historic 4-way trios match, the man we now know as Shuji Kondo and Brother Yashi, they attacked Milano Collection AT and Yoshino, ending the original version of the Italian Connection. Berlinetta Boxer and Baker Yagi would withdraw from Italian Connection in the coming days. For Berlinetta Boxer, he would float around sort of unaffiliated until October, when he would officially join Hagure Gundam and rebrand as Shogo Jet Takagi. Baker Yagi would never wrestle full-time again. He is done for all intents and purposes. In July of 2003, he wrestles his last Toryumon match on September 14th, 2003 against Kness and Stalker Ichikawa in a 3-way match. So this is, to me, like I said at the top, to me, this is the canonical end of Toryumon, is when you see the fraction of the Italian Connection, the fallout of this 4-way match. It's not that there's not good stuff from September of 03 through July of 04, but I really look at it all as sort of being like bonus content, really.
Yeah, because this destruction, or at least this split of Italian Connection, very like my overall thesis of Dragon System in a lot of ways is they are playing the same music. It's just maybe someone else is on guitar this time. This is the classic heel unit. You have clean fighting versus heel fighting happening when this, because you had Milano and Yoshino, who are very much the face side, versus Dottie and Yashi, very much the cheating side. Yagi, interestingly enough, I forget where this was, but the reason why Yagi was not brought forward and joining Hagure Gundam, which means Stray Army, is the fact that as more members would line up and join this group, most famously, Toru Owashi said, "Sumos don't eat bread," and that was pretty much it for Bakery Yagi. And as you said, like even like by the time of El Numero Uno, 2004, Yagi is a full-time referee, and it's interesting at this time the referee corps is Yagi, Yasushi Kanda, who has also had some time where he was the general manager, and Kenta Tomoyaka at this point. And I think, like, for me, like, looking at this, Yagi, of course, suspiciously looking like Johnson, Florida. I don't know why or how, but that is the case. But he was someone, like, when you see the splintering of Italian Connection, especially, like, in 2003, T2P has already been folded in by and large. A lot of the other main members of T2P have already kind of spread throughout at this point. And especially talking about the M2K variant, Second Doi, people like that, they've already kind of moved on from their T2P kind of positions into the next place. Italian Connection, like the argument for this being the big series finale for Toryumon is Italian Connection was the through line. And the fact that the original Italian Connection essentially broke into half really does kind of put a bow on it.
And I would say anything after the Crazy Max Italian Connection feud, like 2003 is a very awkward year for that promotion, or for that unit specifically, because Milano is still Milano, and we'll talk about him and perhaps his decreased star power in just a second here. Yoshino is only getting hotter with the welterweight belt, but then everybody else in that unit is working as heels. You know, it's just the layout of that unit was very, very strange. So the split needed to happen. There's an argument that, hey, it might have been more effective had it happened even earlier, but nevertheless, it happens August 30th, 2003. Speaking of Yagi, he makes his referee debut, not as the initial referee, but as a fill-in referee on September 20th, 2003, because in the four-way trios match, Milano, Yoshino, and Shuji win. They win the UWA World Trios belts. Milano, unsure of what to do after Kondo turned on him, he more or less vacates the belt. He basically gave a bunch of promos saying he wasn't sure what he was going to do, and then vacates them. So September 20th, 2003, Kondo, Owashi, and Yashi, they defeat Milano, Yoshino, and Mori for the vacant UWA World Trios belts. I have a write-up here from Jay's Toryumon USA website, in which he says, quote, there were several incidents of referee violence in the main event, both intentional and unintentional. Kenta was knocked out by an errant Milano Insecurity, making Yagi the referee of a decision. He was knocked out as well, but awoke in time to make the 3 count. It was said to be a very WWE finish, end quote.
Yeah, and you have Mori, who we will have to talk. Well, we are going to talk about why Mori ends up in, or at least affiliated with Italian Connection. I don't believe he becomes a full member until the Switch, I think.
That sounds right.
But you had this happening, and this is very indicative if we want to talk about Ultimo time versus not Ultimo time. These kind of storylines, and especially like all the referee bumps at this point, were very indicative of Ultimo time.
Yeah, and this is a point, like, this is where I fail a little bit as a Dragongate Toryumon historian, because Ultimo's in WWE at this time, so I don't know who's running point here. I don't know if it's Okamura. I don't know if Kito's in the fold yet. I don't know which wrestlers would have had more sway than others, but 2003 is known as the social dance era for a reason. It's heavy on gimmicks, short matches, lots of interference. It's sports entertainment, and you see that here. Unfortunately, think about this: that trios match, Kondo, Owashi, and Yashi versus Milano, Yoshino, and Mori. Big match, big main event, big finish, not televised.
I mean, but that's also the way of the company at this point, though. Like,
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, they tour so much at this point. They do. Let me see if I can pull up the exact event overview or how many shows they have. In 2003, they have 179 shows. So it's just impossible for like all of them to make tape. But at this time, the priorities weren't necessarily so that the angles happen on TV, I guess, is the way to put it.
Yes, exactly. Briefly here, so that was September 20th, 2003. I don't have this in our notes, Mike, but I just want to briefly touch on this. The inaugural Raid Day Parejas kicked off on October 5th, 2003, lasted through the end of October. I think here is where we can really start to highlight part of what makes the Aagan Iisou legacy so awkward, and maybe why this unit, despite its infamy, despite its notoriety, did not click in the way that it should have, because this Raid Day Parejas is a bizarre lineup. It is Shuji Kondo, Dadi Shuji, and Brother Yashi. They win the tournament. But the other teams here, this does not sound like Toryumon. It's Anthony W. Mori and Yoshino. It's Shima and June. It's Dragon Kid and Arakin. It's the first ever Kineska tournament. It's Karaoke Machines 1 and 2. It's Magnum and Milano teaming together. And then it's Masaki Mochizuki and Second Doi. Some of the characters and some of the names are familiar, but what an odd bunch of pairings this was.
Well, like at this time, you had this very weird do-fixer Italian connection, in particular Magnum and Milano kind of thing, where even like after Jay's season finale, where Magnum defeats Milano and exerts all of his energy basically to do so, in that you see this thing where like for a while it was Magnum insisting that Milano was going to dance with him, and like that became a big thing when there was the first crossover dance, and that became the more focused thing. That was the social dance, was do fixer with Italian connection. But you also have Yoon Ugayuchi at that point. Shima was like fixated on needing to have a fourth or really fifth member of Crazy Max, and Yoon was that guy first off. It is something where, at least within Aagan and Hagure Gundam and everything afterwards, Dadi and Yashi were the tag team. Like that was the top team in that way, and that was like the one thing that kind of was the one thing they did right in that tournament, was made sure that the focus. I mean, how much longer did Kondo and Yashi team after everything, like into the All Japan days? For those
Oh god, I mean, up until Wrestle 1, really, because Yashi didn't really make the jump to Wrestle 1.
Yashi retired at that time too.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he retired in 2009.
Yeah, so I mean, you have a start of essentially a 6-year span of them teaming together, because when you looked at Italian Connection, you had the top trio, and there was not necessarily the tag work at that time. So you always had Milano, Yoshino, and Yashi. So Dadi was kind of very lower ranked in this. So the big elevation of Shuji Kondo was starting at this point.
It's the odd part of Aagan, because at this point in time, and I rewatched a lot of this TV this week. Some of it I rewatched the 2003 stuff. The 2004 stuff I had never really seen before. They try so hard to make Doi a thing, to make June a thing, and to make Owashi a thing. And that's what stood out to me, is by the time Aagan Iisou is fully formed, which we'll get to in just a second, when Mochi turns heel in January, this is the confusing part, is that you have this established Dadi Yashi tag team. They're trying to make something of Owashi as like a real monster.
Well, he was the big original power fighter, one heel, unaligned lone wolf of T2P. And
yes.
In this way, you have Yoon, you have Second Doi, and you have Yashi. You have your Shima, you have your Mochizuki, and then you have your Magnum and that.
Yeah, but so the odd thing here as it relates to Aagan is, so, you know, if it was Owashi's unit, let's say, or even if it was closer to Zebrat's dynamics, where it's technically Kai's unit, but, you know, it's Owashi, but Kondo is sort of the front runner here, that would, I think, make more sense. But instead, you wind up in this scenario where they're trying to make Owashi a thing. Kondo has this established tag team, but then also Kondo's going to be a single star. And then you have Mochi, and it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, Mochi's also going to be a single star. And so you not only have this competition that bubbles up at the top, who's going to be the frontline heel, but then the disparity between the three top guys and then the bottom guys in Aagan is so deep. There's no mid card there, and I really wonder if they would have been better off just leaving Shuji and Yashi as like this dominant tag team because they win Rey de Parejas. But then right after that, it's like, well, Kondo's going to go all the way in El Numero Uno too, and it cuts the legs off of Iwashi, who, quite honestly, watching back this TV, I have a whole new appreciation for him as a wrestler because he is awesome in 2003 and 2004.
Yeah, before he really started to put the weight on, he was a different presence, and it really kind of, in a fun way, comes to play on these shows. Yeah, so let's talk about the official forming of Aagan Iisou. I feel like let's move to 2004.
Yes, real quick. So I just want to note real quick. So December 16th, 2003, La Ultima Queda. This was just put on the network. I would recommend watching the entire network file because the undercard is super, super clipped up. But there is on the show Arakin versus Mochizuki. Shin M2K was having issues. Arakin beats Mochizuki in a singles match. It's an awesome singles match. And because of that, Shin M2K has to disband. I also want to point out on the show, sticking in that theme, that everybody should go watch Owashi versus Shima because it fucking rocks. But anyways, we get to January 31st, 2004. The main event of that show is Arakin, Dragon Kid, and Masaki Mochizuki against Shuji Kondo, Toru Iwashi, and Brother Yashi. This is for those UWA World Trios belts. The face team, and this is important to note, they come out to the old Toryumon Sekigun theme, which is like a Japanese version of holding out for a hero. Korakuen gets super into it. It looks like it's going to be this big triumphant babyface victory. And then right at the end, Mochizuki betrays them. He joins Hagure Gundam and renames it Aagan Iisou. And this at the time was looked at as Mochizuki debuted in 1994. This is 2004. And it's funny now, 20 years later, to think that the defining talk of Masaki Mochizuki at this time period from him and the larger community was, hey, I think this guy is going to retire at the end of 2004. He's given 10 years to wrestling, and everybody thinks he's going to be done at the end of this year.
Yeah, so he does this big bait and switch, and it is something where it does feel like we are now weirdly at this time that this is the one time that there's no discussion whatsoever about Masaki Mochizuki retiring right now. Because, I mean, even in 2014, there was talk about he crossed 20 years and he had that match.
How much more does his body have left?
Right, yeah.
And then 10 years later, it's plenty.
Exactly. So it is plenty. The big rebrand with this, Case, do you know what Aagan Iisou means?
I do not.
It means villains wear the same color.
That is fun.
Yeah, so they go from this, they debut themselves as this, and at this time, you're still this is not the full force Aagan, even at this point. There's still one more. Did we already? Yeah, no, that happens much later. But we're not even at full force Aagan, and you have this conflict now that Mochizuki declares himself the leader. However, Iwashi and Kondo are champions with Yashi at this point, and it's already at this point feels very tenuous. Iwashi and Kondo, or Iwashi and Mochi, even as they turn, does not feel like a very certain thing.
It's super awkward because people don't really want to boo Mochi, but I also I just started thinking about charisma when I was doing my notes for this, because it's a little bit like the Valletta situation in January and February, where I would come on here and I would say Mike, they're doing everything right with Valletta. I wouldn't change a thing, but I just don't know if he's going to get over in front of this audience. Turns out Valletta has the charisma and the buy-in factor to make it work. And I look at what they did with Iwashi around this time period, and I wonder if Mochi was always the plan, or if they realized hey, we've kind of done everything we can for Iwashi, and he's still not hitting as a main event heel. This unit needs help, but then that help is awkward because people don't want to boo Mochi. And then also, around this time, it's okay, Mochi's going to be the guy. Well, it's actually Iwashi, he's still pushed, but then also, hey, here's a Kondo singles push. And it's just a mess at the top of the card.
And in the Dragongate sort of way, what do we know about Owashi at this point? He was a strong, silent type, not a promo. So you bring in Mochi at this time, but you also already have Yashi, who, for what he is very effective at what he does, you know? So you even, like, not only if we're talking power rankings and like construction and the org chart here, where we always talk about who's the one, who's the two, who's frontline, who's lost post. Not only is that completely jumbled up by adding in Mochi to this, you now have the fact that it's a very kind of weird presence for a heel unit, and especially with the fact that you have Masaki Mochizuki, who is known as like one of the best promos in the company, like to such an extent, now doing mic work and building up like these kids in a way that he is so much farther ahead from, and sometimes it comes off almost like burying him by just doing promos, you know? Like, it's not intentional, it's just
it's the over generation thing. It's like, hey, we're gonna put these young guys with these old guys. Oh wait, the old guys are gonna be so much better than the young guys.
Yeah, and I think that like the big thing that has to be said is that these are guys, and the kind of heels that Aagan were portraying themselves as, Mochizuki joining them is a cognitive shift, because you have basically, in a way, I feel like that these were more punks than Crazy Max, more punks than M2K, less of like invading heel feeling that Italian Connection had. You have the fact that these are just kind of these five, or at this time, these four guys kind of tearing apart the cards, and you add in Mochizuki, who is much older and comes out wearing like the brown velour jackets, and instead of looking like a badass, you're like, Mochi, why are you like dressed in this way? And it's just very just like cognitive dissonance were high with this unit.
It's a bizarre thing, and I really think, and I would think the company would agree given how quickly Mochizuki turned back face, but all the Mochi stuff just feels like a distraction. It's like it, and you have to put your mindset back in 2022 here, when Kai is Dreamgate champion. It's like if Z-Brats would have formed, and you had Kai, champion or not, still very much in the mix, and you had Shun, who was a burgeoning superstar, and then it was like, hey, we're also going to put Yamato in Z-Brats. And I think on paper it sounds cool, but then you would watch it in all actuality and go like, well, wait a minute, what, like, who am I supposed to buy into in this unit? They're all top guys. It's the Remarkables thing that Berserk avoided for so long, because Shingo was the clear top guy, and you gave Yamato and Doi something else to do, something far away. And with Aagan, it's just never established, like the org chart, like you said, who is the Shingo? Where is the Yamadoi? Who is the, you know, the Kotoka type? I guess it's Brother Yashi, but they don't really use him like that. It's just a mess organizationally.
It's Shogo Takagi. Don't overthink this.
Oh boy, I
mean,
I would not say something so disparaging towards Kotoka.
I mean, yeah, that is actually, I mean, good. Best of luck in your upcoming MMA match, Kotoka. But it's something where, like, they just, in a way, you kind of combine these parts into making this big heel unit, and it's never the great use of all the parts there. Like Shuji Kondo at this time is what on the org chart? Third, fourth, really, because he hasn't talked. So people might think Yashi's higher up than him.
Exactly. Like no one knows what to do with this unit, and they never really figured it out.
They never really do, and that's how they kick off 2024. That the first big show of the year, Mochizuki turning on the Bayface Army, because the big thing is you had Aagan and Mochi, they were not beefing. It was Aagan saying, hey, Shin M2K, we got to stop this. This is just, we've talked about Shin M2K, and essentially like this idea that this babyface version of M2K forms, and no one really kind of wants to be a part of it other than Mochizuki at times, and it kind of becomes the new Sekigun. So the fact that the face team, Aagan, Dragongate, and Mochi came out to the Sekigun theme, in a way felt like that they were ready to put all of that behind them and be like, okay, now we have a babyface, almost veteran army right now at that point. And it was just yanked from them by the end of that match.
February 8th, 2004, Suwa defeats Magnum Tokyo for the UDG Championship.
Kawasaki mode.
Yeah, this was the one in Hakata, which was not any better. These guys never had good chemistry with one another. That match was a train wreck as well. And,
inside and outside the ring worth stating.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So that is, where we are at here. Suwa's the top guy in the company. We'll jump here to February 22nd, 2004, as perhaps people could hear my dog shake in the background just there. But Differ Ariake, February 22nd, 2004. This show is notable because they do Mochi versus Susumu. First time this had happened, I believe, since the infamous Mochizuki contra Mochizuki match. They do this match where if Mochi wins, Susumu has to join Aagan Iisou. And you might be thinking, well, I don't remember Susumu and Aagan Iisou. He must have won the match. You would be wrong. Mochizuki wins the match, and then in the post-match promo, they just attack Susumu with the blue box. They're like, oh, we don't really want you anyways. That'll show you. So you have that confusingness there anyways. And then the main event was Kondo, Owashi, and Yashi defending those UWA World Trios belts against Shima, Fuji, and Suwa. Aagan Iisou wins, and then after the match, they take apart the ring and choke down Fuji with the ring ropes. And Mike, that would lead to something very historical coming up very soon.
Yeah, and funny enough, I found one of my notebooks from a previous era of VoiceGate where I had a written note about this. I forget what this was. So we then go into March case, and we get a Dragon System first, as it is not in the incarnation that we would know it now, but on the same tour, the month it's in Ideon Arena, Osaka #2, 3-match series, crazy match versus Aagan Iisou, no ropes matches. It's Taru versus Shogo Jet Takagi, Masaki Mochizuki versus Don Fuji, and Toru Owashi versus Shima.
Yes, yeah, real quick, I do want to note February 26th, the aforementioned June retired. There is some speculation here because he very abruptly retires. He was very much in the middle of a push, and in a push where it seemed like he also might join Aagan Iisou. He just retires, he gets beat, he gets squashed. The next time he's seen is he's the ring announcer for Dragon Door.
Yep.
And so there were some thoughts there of like, well, maybe he was an Ultimo loyalist who had sniffed something out and kind of knew the writing on the wall. But that is a blow to this company because he was a guy who started very slow, but by 2003 and 2004 was at the very least a passable worker in this company.
Yeah, and he, with the state of Crazy Max at this time, they're going combat mode, case. So they're wearing black fatigues at this point. Yoon was such an important figure because the big problem that we've had with Crazy Max, we've talked about it throughout the series case, is Taru is a big issue because Taru is not a good wrestler, and whenever like you have the 3-way or 4-way 6-man tags, and you kind of have to put Taru in them if you have something else happening with like Don Fuji or Suwa on those shows. So getting a 5th member of Crazy Max became damn near like essential at this point, and Yoon felt like the one that was going to stick.
Yeah, because I've talked about it before, but if you've never seen it, it's unfortunately not on the network for some reason, but it's pretty available elsewhere. The October 15th, 2003 match at Shima Jun versus Magnum and Milano. It's one of the best matches of 2003, and that's sort of a historically great in-ring year.
And that's the dance match. That's the one where Milano and Magnum, if I'm right, they come out and they do the United dance together.
Yeah, so they do. It's honestly, it's awesome. It's
at Ariake
sweet.
too, right? It's at I think it is.
No, it's is it Zepp Sendai that they were at? It was.
It's the one that has the stage or the ramp.
Hold on, let me find it because that's actually relevant to what I was going to say. So 10:15. No, it was in Fukuoka, but it wasn't Star Lanes. It was Pavilion Hall.
Okay.
Which they maybe only ran in 2003, but this building shows up on TV. But the first part of the entrance, they do Milano's like Italian supermodel entrance, and then they get in the ring and they do the Magnum dance, and it's unreal. It's so cool.
Yeah, Milano at this time was an aura guy, and it was one of those things where a little bit maybe Jericho-esque with him and Milano at this point, with him and Magnum. Sorry, Magnum was kind of Jericho-esque.
Yes, very much so. So, anyways, I want to bring up the June thing just because I think it matters to this promotion as a whole at this time period. In terms of the no ropes matches, so they do this 3-match series, March 4th, 2004. This made TV. I will send Mike a link so he can put it in the episode description of the TV that this is on, because it's not quite on the network yet, but it is on the internet. It's so good, and it's not one of those like 4.5-star match type deals, but the 3-match series, if you look at it as one segment, especially Mochi versus Fuji and Owashi versus Shima, just marvelous stuff. The Mochi Fuji stuff feels like a sumo fight on crack, basically. And then Owashi versus Shima, I mean, these guys wrestled a ton from October 03, or I guess December 03 through the end of Toryumon. And Owashi beats him a lot of the time. He goes, I think, 2-3. Yeah, they had 5 singles matches from December of 2003 through June of 2004. Owashi goes 2-3, but in all of them, Shima is so giving. And it's just crazy he didn't work out as sort of your top-of-the-line heel.
Yeah, and I think it is the mic aspect, really.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this with Ben K a few years ago. He's got all the right tools except for the fact that he can't talk.
And I mean, imagine though if Owashi discovered battle rap in 2004.
Oh, if only. If he was doing Yo Mama jokes and promo battles.
If he was doing, I'm trying to think, really Spirit 2004, if he was doing Jackass stunts or Wild and Out, like the original Wild and Out run. Yeah.
El Numero Uno begins on March 6, 2004. The opening night of the tournament is not much special. The only real note there is that Horiguchi wins over at Kondo with a backslide, continuing the theme from last year. It's really March 26 where we have to jump to the Henry Sugawara, Anthony W. Mori storyline. Mike, can you fill in the blanks on this one? This is much more your department than mine.
Absolutely. So Anthony W. Mori was unique amongst T2P that he was the leader of this group called the Royal Brothers. And the problem with the Royal Brothers is that basically at that time, Anthony W. Mori was the only one that was either good or healthy at one point. Like there was 3 of them. There was Anthony W. Mori, Henry III Sugawara, now known as Takuya Sugawara, and then Philip J. Fukamasa. Don't worry about Philip J. Fukamasa. He's just listed as the 3rd here. But essentially, it becomes like this tag team where Anthony W. Mori is waiting for Henry to come. Like he's always waiting for Henry. And then at one point, Sugawara advances from Mexico and they start teaming together. And it becomes very clear very quickly. Like he goes back to Mexico, it's back and forth. That's not a permanent thing. That's part of the reason why Mori ends up doing Italian Connection stuff so quickly at 2003. Like you had to fill in that blank there. But Henry III comes back finally, like really for good. And it's clear that he's not really a royal brother. Like he's already starting to turn. And it leads to this big point where they do a masked demon gimmick where everyone was like, Henry is the masked demon. Anthony W. Mori refused to believe that Henry would betray him. And Henry was doing these awful things as this masked demon with Aagan was doing things throughout the month of March, but then he unmasks. It's revealed as Henry Sugawara. He now goes by Takuya Sugawara, his real name. And Anthony W. Mori is so shocked he goes into a physical trance for the next few months.
Yeah, well said. That sums it up nicely.
We will talk about the other aspect of Anthony W. Mori when we start getting into the El Numero Uno finals. But We'll get to that when we get to that.
We'll get to that shortly here. I want to also briefly mention, because this was a pay-per-view that aired, so this show aired in full, the March 28th Differ Ariake show. This was still El Numero Uno. Good stuff here. Owashi beats Yoshino in a really good singles match. Mochi and Shima go to a double KO finish in their singles match. And then you have Dragon Kid versus Suwa. And this match is a far cry from Dragon Kid versus Suwa, August 24th, 2000. Suwa, at this point in time, feels so out of place for whatever reason. And it's interesting because the prevailing
he's
thought...
UG champion.
He's UDG champion, but doesn't feel like he's a part of the promotion, if that makes sense. That's always the vibe that I get. The prevailing thought of this time period, I went back, thanks to the Wayback Machine, read some message board stuff, listened to the Timeline podcast that Jay did, was that they were going to build to CIMA versus Suwa at World. But they couldn't do that because in this Dragon Kid versus Suwa match, Suwa takes a Hurricane Rana from the ring to the apron. He just lands in the worst possible way you could imagine. He destroys his shoulder. He still wins this match, but March 28th, 2004 is the last Suwa match in Toryumon history, and it is a bummer.
Yeah, and it's something where, so we touched on the fact he defeats Milano in February for the belt. He becomes, was this even a UDG defense? Right
no,
here?
this is El Numero Uno.
So this was a part of the tournament.
Yes.
And so when Magnum loses the belt, actually, the loss happens in February. Magnum comes out a couple weeks later and says, like, I'm going to go away for the while. We joked around at the time and called it him losing his smile, basically. But he said, like, he basically, everything Magnum did went out the window when he faced Suwa because he used up all of his strength against Milano and he's going to need to step away for a while. That was, and it's something where I wonder now how much of this really is the case, though. The belief is that Magnum, with his background, was able to get wheels in motion for the split at this time. At this time, also, coincidentally, you will start seeing the Dragongate logo start popping up at this point. It is of the belief that they were trying to already seed previous use of that logo before they switched it over at that point. But
Magnum does the same exact thing that CIMA did before he split. He steps away for a little bit. He shows up here and there, and when he shows up, it's super awkward.
Right, exactly. And it's really kind of fitting the fact that Magnum has his last, at least for a while, major match against Suwa, and Suwa has that against him because that you're right, Suwa does not make the split. He leaves pretty soon after. And he is the reason why we have social dance wrestling as a phrase. He was sick of it all at that point. And yeah, it's so weird because like Suwa feels like such a missing part of this Aagan versus Crazy Max feud.
Completely. And I just watched today Suwa's return match, which was on the first Dragongate tour. And watching him wrestle with a Dragongate logo beneath him is a very odd look. It didn't look right.
Yeah, he leaves for good by the end of 2004.
He's gone by the end of the first tour. He does August, and that's it. And maybe September.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear that he's on the way.
So, El Numero Uno 2004, we get to the finals. The quarterfinals, the guys that made it through were CIMA, Owashi, Dragon Kid and Susumu, and Masaki Mochizuki and Naoki Tanizaki. Tanizaki was an injury replacement for Ryo Saito, who broke his arm during this tournament. So you lose Suwa, and you lose Saito. And that takes us to El Numero Uno 2004, April 28th, in the Yoyagi National Gymnasium in Tokyo, Japan. El Numero Uno 2004, the finals.
This final show in Yoyogi, El Numero Uno 2004, April 28th, 2004. And we start with the semifinal draw, Case.
That's right. So, at this point, we knew it was going to be Kondo who got in through the Loser Revives Battle Royal, which they still do to this day. Dragon Kid, CIMA, and Masaki Mochizuki. So 2 Aagan Iisou guys, a Crazy Max guy, and Dragon Kid would have been Fixer?
Sekigun.
Okay. Yes.
Sekigun at this point.
So they start this show in the ring. They draw pairs. It obviously turns out to be CIMA and Kondo and Dragon Kid and Mochizuki. And then there's a great angle where Aagan Iisou goes to attack the baby faces, and CIMA and Dragon Kid get the upper hand on them. And it made me really want a CIMA and Dragon Kid versus Mochi and Kondo tag match that we never ended up getting.
Yeah, and the way that this beatdown happens is so cool because it's all set up by Owashi. And the wild thing I feel about this show and about Aagan here is it's not Mochi who draws the eye during this. It's or it's Kondo who is attacking there, and you kind of are drawn towards Kondo in this attack. And it was a really kind of fun angle to kick off the show and really kind of get things in there. And also in the pre-show, they were showing the clips of the quarterfinals. Did like the fact that Shima tries to go for the full course on Awashi and Awashi falls on him.
That was a repeated angle. So
right, yeah.
If you watch Toryumon during this time period, and I don't remember off the top of my head, if in the last singles match they have, if Shima's able to do it, but the whole thing was that Shima couldn't get Awashi up for the Schwein. So they have a singles match where Shima goes for the Iconoclasm, and Awashi just falls on top of him, and it's crazy. And then you have the highlights that they showed here, and then you'll see later in this show, Shima hits a perfect driver on Awashi, and it's like a big fucking deal, and Shima sells it like it's the hardest thing he's ever done. But the ongoing theme there was that Shima could not hit the Schwein on Awashi because Awashi was so big.
Yeah, so he does the perfect driver to do that. And we go right into the opener case. We have the Italian Connection Do Fixer Alliance of Milano Collection AT, Yoshino, Genki Horiguchi, and Susumu Yokosuka versus Sekigun, Ultimo Dragon, Kenichiro Arai, Second Doi, and Super Shisa.
This match kicks ass. I don't know about you.
Oh, Shisa in this doing like leg whips?
Dude, that's the thing, is that, and you and I are in the 0.01% of Super Shisa fans.
Like to the extent that he is well aware of our weird fandom of his.
Literally, it's been told to him numerous times by one individual, which I always appreciate. I love it. But
tacos are going to be on a Shisa if we ever make it to Kobe.
Oh, God, and I want to so bad. I want to go to his taco store so bad. Did you see that he and Dragon Kid and Choco Flake Keiichi got tacos this week?
Well, good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, Choco Flake actually looks really healthy. I was happy to see that.
Yeah.
Not that he's had health issues, but he's just aged well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense, though.
That's the thing, is that it's... The noticeable part of this is... Shisa was old for a very long time. I mean, the 2010s is when Shisa slows down, especially in the latter half of the 2010s. But even in the front half, he was an aging junior heavyweight. He had the body and he had the footwork and he had the approach of an aging junior heavyweight. 2004, he is so light on his feet and so quick moving around this ring. Same with Horiguchi. Those are the two guys that jumped out to me in this match.
Yeah, and it's something where, and the version that is available, it is from the pay-per-view version, and you get to have Separato starting off here, and you get a lot of different directions going on with this, but it really does feel like that it is kind of a Shisa show, and it's interesting with Doi at this point, because he's very much like, if we're talking about our timeline, this is now virtually a year before the Brave Gate tournament. And he's just kind of like screaming off the screen that this guy is ready to get to that point.
And again, I think they made a really honest effort with him. And I just, for whatever reason, it didn't seem to take. Doi in 2004 does not have the charisma that Doi has in 2005. And it was like an overnight change in January. I think they made an honest effort with him in Shinen 2K. That unit fell apart, Doi fell by the wayside, and so here you have, basically this scrappy 8-man tag that just happens to have Ultimo in it. But again, the star here is Shisa. He's on another planet in this match, and it would be a recurring theme because I just remembered World that year. The opening match on World is Genki, Saito, and Tanizaki versus Mori, Milano, and Shisa, and I went 4 stars on this match, and I went 4 stars on that World opener too.
And I think also at this it's worth stating, Ultimo very much, he's feeling good after his elbow surgeries finally take here. Like he
looks thin. He looks like he had lost some weight.
Yeah, it was the thing that was the other thing that took me aback was Ultimo was moving very well on this. Susumu gets the win for the Italcon and Do Fixer side with the Yokosuka cutter on Doi. Very fitting for that time. A whole lot of fun. Ultimo did a lot in this match.
Ultimo did a lot. Everybody really does a lot outside of, and I think this is part of what's worth noting about this time period to try to contextualize it a little bit more is...
Milano.
Exactly. If this match happens a year earlier, or especially 2 years earlier, I think we're all coming away from it going like, God, look at this Milano Collection AT guy. Milano is an afterthought of this match, quite honestly.
Oh, it's something where he's an afterthought on this show. Like, let's not mince words here.
And I attribute that to the Magnum match from December, where I think, and this is, where I wish I could fire up the TEW machine and do some fantasy booking here. But, in all actuality, Milano probably should have beat Magnum, and they probably should have, at least for the first quarter of the year, maybe not do this at World, but it would have made sense to either do Milano versus Mochi or Milano versus Kondo. I think that would have fit thematically with the tone of that promotion at the time, and that's why I say that Sua, who was UDG champion for a month, just felt like he was in his own little universe, because Sua wasn't... I mean, Crazy Max versus Aagan was a thing, but it was really more of a Shima thing than it was a Crazy Max thing. At least that's the way it always felt like. And, Sua was just, off on his own little island there. I mean, his defenses, I think he had the defense against Araken, and then he gets hurt against Dragon Kid.
Right. So
but my point there, sorry to cut you off, but I realized I did a poor job explaining myself. The point there is that Milano just gets his balls cut off in December, and he was already, I think, trending downward. The Magnum thing with him, they never had good chemistry outside of the Rey de Parejas, where they're an awesome team, but the bloom was off the rose a little bit there. There had been 2 years of Italian supermodel Milano, and he needed a change in direction. And it's just weird that, really past September of that year, it becomes Aagan versus Crazy Max and Aagan versus Shima, and not Aagan versus a retooled Italian Connection. It feels like Milano never gets his revenge on the guys that turned on him.
Yeah, and it's something where basically after the Aagan split happens, Italian Connection just is on life support throughout the end of it. They add, we can jump further ahead, out of timeline. Mori becomes an official member of Italian Connection, and they win the first Open the Dragongate tournament, and they're the first champions. But that's kind of it. That's such a footnote for the unit and for Milano at that time, that he was the first Triangle Gate champion. There was no evolution for Italian Connection. There was no retooling. Yoshino could have been retooled at any point, as we've now seen at the power of retrospect. The crowd was going to accept him regardless.
Yep.
You could have already started retooling him, and I don't know what you do with the difficult thing of Milano is that Milano is such a prescribed character. How do you change being the Italian supermodel, other than going full heel like he ends up doing in New Japan?
There's an avenue there, I think, where he could have played very similar beats to what BB Hulk did in 2010, or I think there's a serious supermodel aspect, serious in terms of, he was taking his career more seriously, that is never really explored, because again, unless I'm missing something, and again, this is sort of my weak spot historically, but I don't think they ever do Milano versus Kondo in a singles match. If they did, it didn't feel like a blood feud. I mean, I'm going through results now, and yeah, they never do that. It's this weird afterthought where he's the guy that falls by the wayside, and when you had a chance to rehab him and give him direction in December, instead they go with Magnum and then Desua, and then that falls apart, and then you don't have a champion until the last day of the promotion. So it's just a total mess, but it is really interesting seeing a young Genki and a young Shisa, or a younger Shisa, fly around the ring, and Milano was the guy where it's like, oh yeah, he was there too.
Yeah, it's such a wild and weird feeling. With that, we have some Ultimo shenanigans after the match, but we lead pretty straight into another shenanigan-filled match.
We've got to talk about this Ultimo stuff for a second.
So do you have... I was one of the things I was looking for was trying to find what Ultimo was saying during this time. Do you have what Ultimo was saying?
I don't have what he's saying, but it doesn't matter. Here's what everybody needs to know. There's this great 8-man tag team match. The Toryumon stars are on display in a wonderful way here. And then after the match, Genki Horiguchi and Ultimo Dragon cut a promo, and I don't know what was said, but it ends with Ultimo hitting his finisher on Genki and burying him in the middle of the ring. And Mike, this is time for a segment called If This Was 2004. And if this was 2004, we would have spent 25 minutes talking about how awful this was. I was aghast when I saw this post-match angle.
Yeah, like, it's something very much where, especially Genki, a year to the day where he becomes a made man, he gets he basically gets put into his place by Ultimo, and it's something that happens a lot with Genki over the years. Like, especially since Ultimo's return, I feel like Genki's always the one. It's Genki and Dragongate is the one that Ultimo will slap around a bit.
It's one of those things that, like, if you go back, and I would not advise doing this simply because of me, not because of Mike, but if you went back and listened to our shows from 5 years ago when Ultimo first came to Dragongate, this is what I was afraid of.
Right, the Ultimo show.
Yeah, that it would be him and Yamato in a promo battle, and Ultimo would hit Yamato with his finisher. And Genki, I need to figure out what was said there in that promo battle, but just out of nowhere, he's just he eats a finisher for no reason after looking awesome in that opener.
Toryumon 2004.
And then this is the last time that we see Ultimo and Toryumon up until World, where he wrestles Nakajima.
Right, yeah, so he goes away. He really, at this point, now that my timeline's right about this, once a month kind of appearance, really, from him, and it's usually around the Tokyo show or whatever Sky Perfect pay-per-view they were doing at that time.
Yeah.
So we then go to Florida Brothers, Michael Iwasa and Daniel Mishima versus Taru and Takashi Okamura. So I don't know exactly the full storyline going into this, other than Stalker was with Taru, who brings out the full Buku Dojo out there. And Case, I know I'm higher on Florida Brothers matches than you are. This was an interminably long Florida Brothers match.
I can't believe Cage Match says 8 minutes. I thought this was an hour.
It was a thing where at a certain point I just wrote down real long and then wrote the finish. Yagi fell for the Florida Brothers special. Of course, that is when they do the fake chair shot and then pop up for the national anthem. But this time it was done with a baseball bat.
Okamura and Ultimo, same locker room, April 2004, one match after another. Would love to know what the vibe in that locker room was like that night.
Yeah. Because Okamura didn't wrestle at did he wrestle at Kobe World that year?
I don't believe so. Okamura, no, this was the only thing he worked in 2004.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been at all the shows, of course, but
yeah, I think he's the guy running point here.
Right. Yeah. So it's just like a very awkward comedy match. I like Florida Brothers. I think Florida Brothers are great. I am a lot more high on them than Case is, but this was not a good Florida Brothers match. This is not the Florida Brothers that everyone thinks of. This is not Kensuke Sasaki and Akira Hokuto getting involved here.
Final match of Takashi Okamura's career. We have to add this to the list of Dragongate Holy Grails alongside Shingo versus Shisa and Shima versus Ricochet.
And Tomohiro Ishii's entire stint, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. This is August 10th, 2013. It is Masaki Mochizuki, Stalker Ichikawa, Akira Tozawa, Shingo Takagi, and Takashi Okamura against BB Hulk, KZ, Mondai Ryu, Yamato, and a wrestler by the name of Diablo.
Oh, Diablo. I remember Diablo.
He would show up and work. Where was this? He was a Gifu based guy. He would work the Gifu show.
Yeah. He was I think he sold tickets and got on those shows. I think he was like a promoter for them.
Yeah, and he was a pro wrestling Kageki guy.
I've not thought about pro wrestling Kageki in a good decade. Case.
Well, I would say most people haven't. I would be concerned if you had. And yeah, there's like a 10-year period where he works all of the Gifu shows, and you know when he stops is 2018.
Had to be a Shima guy.
Yeah, because he worked. So the last time he's in Dragongate, oh no, he's on the 2019 show. So it's really post pandemic that they haven't needed him, but that could still be. Who knows?
Yeah, who is to say? Yeah. Really, at that point, like when you get to that point, you're just like, oh, Yeah, now we're talking about Diablo. Like, I mean, we are probably case. Like, I'm not gonna mince words here. We are the only two people who care about Diablo.
That's correct. So let's go back to something that everybody cares about in 2020, El Numero Uno 2004.
That's right. We have the first semifinal matchup: Dragon Kid versus Masaki Mochizuki. The finish was Sugawara tries to hold down DK for the triangle kick. Somehow, DK is still able to duck his way out of it. Aagan, who is accompanying DK, spits water into Mochi's face. We get an Ultra Rana, this rock.
It's hard to explain in words how perfect that finishing sequence was. The timing of Mochi, Dragon Kid, Owashi, and Aagan, they didn't miss a beat. They weren't off by a tenth of a second. It was unbelievable to watch.
And this match only goes 10 minutes. The hidden thing about this show, other than the opener and the final, nothing is over 10 minutes. So it's just a complete, like, great sprint. There's complexity, I feel like, in Mochizuki and Aagan that I wanted to bring up with you.
Yeah, please.
I feel like that M2K and post M2K babyface Mochi up until the Aagan turn in 04, you had a very much like one kind of style of Mochizuki. You see certain things in this semi-final match that feel a lot more like modern Masaki Mochizuki, in particular the stomach work and the willingness to kind of, in simplicity, being able to like break someone down. Because Mochizuki was someone that, even though he was like the Buku Dojo guy in the heel, it's not that the psychology was not there. It just was not always like first and foremost. This is a turn to kind of the Mochizuki that you would see in 2018, I feel like.
Yes, the disparity between 1999 and 2000 Mochi is far greater than 2004 to 2024 Mochi. The shell of the wrestler that we know now is very much active and present in this match, which is a good thing.
So what'd you have on this?
I went 4 stars. And
okay. All right. I was 3 3/4.
Okay. And part of that might just be that, again, that finishing sequence, Mochi goes for that triangle kick in the corner. Just the timing of all of that, where he hits the kick, Mochi at that point bounces off the ropes, and normally, Dragon Kid would fall to the middle of the ring, stumble to his knees, and Mochi would do like a big roundhouse kick. But then Aagan comes in, grabs his knees, Dragon Kid, Ultra Hurricane Rana. It's all perfect. And that, that last 15 seconds is like, well, shit, that was a great match.
Yeah, and it's something where like you get the reversals that DK had there, and at that moment in this crowd, I feel like they're like, okay, we get Dragon Kid in the finals, and that's what we were hoping for. Like, you weren't necessarily like, I don't feel like Dragon Kid came into this show as the person you thought was going to win the tournament. I feel like Shuji Kondo probably was.
Well, yeah, that's something that I really wish I would have been able to have the perspective of watching this show in the moment, because with those 4 guys, it's like, well, you could do Shima and Dragon Kid because that was largely unexplored, but that's a weird pairing. You could do Mochi and Kondo, I guess, and do like double heel main event, especially knowing that Mochi would turn babyface, only really a month and a half later. Mm-hmm. Or you could have Dragon Kid win, and then, at that point, it's like, all right, well, I guess Kondo's going to win in his match, and that's what he did.
Yeah. So we move on to the semifinal. Shima versus Shuji Kondo. Shuji Kondo wins with the King Kong lariat here. This one goes straight into Crazy Match versus Aagan. We do get full on combat mode Shima coming out, though, like full intensity with this. And it's something where I feel like this match is, if people want to go back to 2020, and especially Shuji Kondo's permanent return to Dragongate, if you were wondering why we wanted to have Shuji Kondo turn heel and have one last heel run, you see it against Shima, just the way he breaks him down throughout this.
This is an excellent night for Shuji Kondo, I thought. I think this
absolutely.
is really perhaps the peak of his powers because of what he does here, and then again in the finals against Dragon Kid. I've said this before, where I'm not sure Dragongate would have been better off had Kondo stuck around in 2005. I think for the sake of the company, it was probably good that they shed that skin. But for the overall career of Kondo, I think it was far worse because I think he is so talented, especially at this time. And this might sound harsh, but I think he largely spent 15 years working with people who were beneath him, people who weren't as talented as him, and it greatly hurt, the overall output we got in his career.
Yeah, and where you have him here as like the interesting and fun thing about Aagan was you would think that Toru Owashi and Shuji Kondo, if you looked at them in a lineup, you're like, okay, they're just the big beefy boys. But there's a difference there, and there's a complexity there. Kondo is like the idea that force equals mass times acceleration. Like that's his thing. Whereas Toru Owashi, as we've seen in the next match against Don Fuji, that's a lot more of a big boy special kind of thing. And Kondo loses that when he left.
No, Kondo has finesse to him.
Yeah, there's a smoothness to it, like especially in the way like he started throwing around Shima. Shima's very giving in this finishing stretch. He ate things and sold more than I saw him sell at all during his 2012 Dreamgate run.
Kondo does a German suplex in this match, and I swear to God, Shima lands directly on, and I say this with this verbiage for a reason, Shima lands directly on his fucking neck in like a way that is so shocking, where...
Did this take 5% off of his neck health that would finally come due in 2008?
It would have to. Mike, he takes it he takes it to his neck, in only his neck. I've never seen a bump like this before.
Yeah, it's insane.
It is. The other thing, and this was not the result that I saw coming when we started doing Dragongate 25 stuff, but I have really grown this time around watching this Toryumon footage, or even a match like this for the first time, because I had never seen this before. I have really grown to not only respect, but to thoroughly enjoy these Shima Toryumon era car crash singles matches where, in the midst of Shima and Kondo doing spots, you have Crazy Max and Aagan running in and brawling in the ring and around the ring and everywhere. It's
but
much
just
like,
not into these two guys. Just happens around them.
Yes, it just happens around them like it's a video game. But it's a lot like the Mochi hair versus hair match where it's chaotic and it breaks the tradition of what you would expect from Japanese wrestling, and it's so different, and there's nothing really in wrestling that feels like these Toryumon singles matches right now, and maybe that's why they jump out to me. But man, I have really come to enjoy matches like this, specifically from Shima.
Yeah, and especially like at a time where Crazy Max is existing, and it's existing not necessarily in the strongest place, seeing him kind of be able to, for in a night that really is Shuji Kondo's night, do the things and take the loss in the way that it felt like a big deal. Does not help later on what happens with Shima on this show, but at least in this moment, this felt like that this was a very big win for Kondo.
Very much so.
So we go into Don Fuji versus Toru Owashi, basically right up after this, and at this time, Case, we get to play Look at That Young Boy, because Don Fuji collides into a young BB Hulk on a tope suicida.
Thank you. This was one of my questions. I knew Shingo was right behind.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He did not jump onto Shingo. I could not identify who that was. I couldn't tell from when I watched it if it was Hulk or not. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it has to be Hulk because Tozawa was still in high school. Like at this point. Or like just graduated high school and did not join up at the gym at that point. Like it's something with like Tozawa and like this, but this was a time that like both Hulk and Shingo were in the gym. Shingo's all over this card.
Shingo is, yes. I'm always painfully reminded of misinformation I have whenever I see Shingo in a Toryumon ring. I'm like, oh damn it, I really blew that one. But it's important to note here with Fuji and Owashi, I have the opening match at 4 stars. The Florida Brothers match you can just skip. It's completely not important. I have DK and Mochi at 4 stars. I have Shima and Kondo at 3 3/4. And then I have this at 3.5. And so say what you will about Toryumon in 2004, but this show was not only flying by, but it was excellent as well.
So for me, my star ratings, I was a little bit lower on the opener. I was still 3.5 stars. Florida Brothers gets the big old do not rate. DK and Mochi, I was in 3 3/4. I was 4 for Shima and Kondo. I love Kondo when like Kondo is really kind of feeling him in this aspect. And yeah, I was 3.5 on this. This was just big guys throwing bombs at this. Molten trading choke slams, the crowd going wild for that.
Yep. No, I mean, look, it ties into the post-match angle too. They tried. I mean, they really tried with Owashi, and I don't know, again, if it's the bottleneck of top guys they had in Aagan Iisou. I don't know if, look, some people, I mean, you know, I deal with this in my own job. There are some people that are super talented that are not leaders. They're not people that you gravitate towards to when they walk in a room. And there are some people that have that charisma. And I don't know if this is a case of them doing everything right with Owashi and him just not having the charisma to be that top guy. I don't know what it is, but I really have come away over the last week with a full-blown new appreciation for peak Owashi, which is 2003 and 2004, and for the effort that Dragongate put into him at this time period, because he beats Fuji here, and then he and Shima have a great post-match brawl where Shima ends up hitting him with a super kick, and then that aforementioned perfect driver where Shima, even though he hits the move, he sells his ass off. It was all so impressive, and it's like, God, I just feel like they made a horrible miscalculation when they put together Aagan Iisou, and it really did a disservice to Owashi in particular.
Well, I feel like part of that, though, Shima basically, in a way, one-ups Owashi in this segment. Like, Owashi should not have, like, eaten those two moves and stormed off. Like, he should have laid out Shima. Like, that was the thing here. Like, Shima, like could not make himself look weak for two young guys on the night, and Owashi needed it.
Well, but I feel like, I mean, you got to remember, Owashi beats him in that no ropes match, and even though in El Numero Uno, Shima beat him in the quarterfinals, like, these guys are very much trading wins at this point. You could argue that at this point in time, Owashi had the upper hand. He beats him in December. He beats him in the no rope match. Aagan, obviously, as we've talked about a number of times on this show, they're getting pushed like crazy during the Toryumon part of 2004. This kind of feels like Shima's evening the score in the context of everything and not him getting one up on Owashi.
I don't know. I feel like in this moment, like, yeah, you're absolutely right with this about like the setup there. But for the weirdness of Aagan, if Owashi was going to be that front player, Shima had to kind of still eat some more shit here.
That's probably fair. That's probably fair.
And especially like considering the weirdness of Mochizuki joining the unit. Like Owashi, it wouldn't have saved things if Owashi, you know, beats up Don Fuji, then beats up Shima, then beats up Taru too for good measure. But it is something like we've talked about, like what was the issue with like this heel unit. The org chart is completely out of whack. You probably could have still salvaged Owashi into a 1B at this point. I feel like if you let him completely like murder Shima here.
You might be onto something. I don't know. Maybe on the night where, you know, Owashi is this dominant giant singles figure, maybe you also don't have Shuji Kondo go to the finals of El Numero Uno.
Yeah. You may be, you know, put over the monster at that point. Semi-final match. Before this match, it is important to note, we talked a little bit about this pairing before, but in this match, Anthony W. Mori and Naoki Tanizaki are accompanied out to the next match against Takuya Sugawara and Brother Yashi by Ryo Saito. Saito, when he gets hurt, and at this point, Do Fixer is face again. One thing I did not mention at the start of Mori talk, it was a big deal, the fact that Saito was now, even though he was hurt, he was back with Mori. They were paired together in those T2P days before Sugawara getting over there, but then he turned heel to join Do Fixer when Do Fixer was a heel unit. Just worth saying that.
Yes, no, very much so. You know, this match is odd because
I dug it though.
I'm not surprised by that. I did too, and it's one of those. It's like really story intensive. So The match, which again, I don't know if we clarified this, but this whole show is available with the link in the description. It's on my YouTube channel because it's not quite on the network yet. It's so story heavy that it's really hard to parachute into this specific match. But I come away from this era, 2003, 2004, 2005. Every time I'm in this ballpark, I am blown away by how talented Anthony W. Mori was.
Yeah, it is something where, and I guess it's kind of our fault, like more young technical wrestlers should watch Anthony W. Mori matches.
Oh my God, yes.
He has like a certain thing, especially for a guy, if you're someone who's like looking for like not necessarily like the most muscular thing, like Anthony W. Mori, with the exception of Dragongate, is the slightest person in the Toryumon generation. Like that's part of the thing, that he is a prince and he wrestles very elegantly. But the storyline about this match is that Anthony W. Mori is so in shock that Cyrio basically has to get him into the match. But the thing is that as long as Brother Yoshi's in the match, he is just tearing him apart because he thinks somehow he's going to be able to get Henry back. And there's a moment in the match where Sugawara grabs the Henry crown, puts it on, and Mori looks like he met Santa Claus. And then Sugawara, and like, I don't like Takuya Sugawara as a pro wrestler. I feel like that's something that's pretty well...
That is well established.
Yeah, if you listen to the show long enough, you know I have some pretty strong thoughts about this guy. His heel work as he then like snaps and like attacks both Tanyan and Mori, and the shit-eating grin he has is tremendous. And
yeah, Sugawara's career should be defined by the work that he did with and against Mori, because they brought out the best in one another. And that is, again, there's a lot of Sugawara that doesn't have Mori, and a lot of it is really unenjoyable. But with Mori, the technical wrestler thing is great. Any young technical wrestler should be watching him, because not only was he brilliant on the mat, but he's also so charismatic. And oftentimes those two things are not linked. And this is a match where, it's so story driven, but Mori sucks me in, even if I really don't care about this story historically. His hot tag is great. The finish is great. Very, very enjoyable stuff here.
Yeah, so the finish is soon after Sugawara does this trick. He then attacks Ryo Saito. They try to snap his arm. He starts screaming. Mori then loses it. He snaps out of it. The referee gets distracted by Tanyan. He box attacks Yashi. He hits Sugiura and gets Yashi, with the elegant magic crucifix bomb to win. In the post-match, Mori and Ryo Saito love each other. They hug and they leave to Sometimes by Britney Spears. That will not be on the network.
No, but no notes. Couldn't have drawn it up better myself.
Yeah, that's the other fun thing about like getting this kind of cut, is you get all the old music with that, and the Britney Spears aspect of it all. It's time for the finals of the 2004 El Numero Uno tournament. Dragon Kid versus Shuji Kondo. As we kind of said up top, the winner of this tournament ends up being Dragon Kid. Dragon Kid is the 2004 El Numero Uno, and we are in the Dragon Kid Kingdom, and he's dressed in all white as he gets his crown.
Mike, I'm curious if you have an answer for this off the top of your head, because I struggle to think of it as I was sitting here asking myself this question. Do you have a favorite Shuji Kondo singles match?
I mean, it's something where I don't really have one.
That's an odd question. I feel like everybody would have a different answer for it.
Yeah, like it might be this match in a way. I don't feel like he ever really got like the singles run that at least where he was working, where I was like dialed into it, I would say.
Yeah, because my mind went to, is it this? Is it the Omega match? Is it the Nakajima match from 2007? I look on Cage Match. There's a Kaz Hayashi singles match from 2009 that's rated 9.25, but I don't think I've ever seen that. I think this is better than anything he did in Wrestle 1, even the T-Hawk stuff, which I really liked. I ask because I think this is in the upper echelon of Shuji Kondo singles matches, not just in terms of the star rating, the overall match quality, but in terms of peak performance, this might be the best Kondo ever looked.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because you have White Costume Dragon Kid, and White Costume Dragon Kid, as we'll get into in a future episode of the show, you get the passion of Dragon Kid. You're able to basically kill the guy for 15 minutes when he's wearing white, because that's the point.
It's a very simple formula.
Yeah, you beat the crap out of Dragon Kid, and then at the exact right moment, Dragon Kid does a springboard Tijeras to the floor. That's absolutely insane. There's a swinging Kondo clutch, a super stun dog, and it goes straight into the Dragon Rana, where the crowd explodes for the 3 count. As soon as the Dragon Rana is hit, the crowd realizes, holy shit, Dragon Kid just won the El Numero Uno tournament.
I feel like you blew by the best spot of this match, Mike.
Oh, I thought the best spot was the springboard to Harris to the floor.
That was great. Don't get me wrong. The best spot of this match. And as soon as this episode is posted, I'm going to post a GIF of this spot.
Okay, I'm interested to see what you like more. Okay,
it's when Kondo is in the corner and he goes for the Lanzarse on Dragon Kid. Dragon Kid moves out of the way, and Kondo, without skipping a beat, makes a 180 and picks Dragon Kid up to where, like, back first, so where Dragon Kid's face is facing the ring, and he does a reverse Lanzarse, and it nearly kills Dragon Kid. It's one of the most, to me, like, everybody knows the spot from their match at World where Dragon Kid tries to slide under Kondo, and Kondo grabs him by the head and dumps him on his neck. I think this spot is 10 times more violent than that one. I can't believe this isn't the spot that everybody always gifts.
Yeah, and especially, like, there are certain Dragon Kid kill moves. Why this was not become a Dragon Kid move.
His head, from the camera angle they shoot it at, looks like it's about an inch away from hitting the bottom turnbuckle and just destroying his head permanently. I couldn't believe this spot.
It's wild. This match is just Dragon Kid just taking some of the grossest bumps, and Kondo being, like, just an incredible base here, and the body control and all of that together. It's really something where we talked about 1999, Dragon Kid being easily not the worst wrestler at the time, but the greenest one, the one that still was not a finished product here. By 2004, he's so far past that point that this felt like a actual, like, surprise upset moment in a way that felt perfect.
It's weird. It's probably, not only is it maybe my favorite individual Kondo performance ever, in terms of accolades, this is maybe the peak of Dragon Kid's singles career.
I mean,
he headlines. Well, he doesn't really headline World 2006. That's the thing.
I think that is his best singles match, though.
Oh, interesting. That World 2006, you think is his best singles match?
I feel like it's because, like, the big moment there, maybe. I don't know. I
think the Pac match is better.
The Pac match in 2019. 2019. Yeah, no, you're right. Why did I completely forget about the Pac
and that's
match?
That's probably what it's probably El Numero Uno 2004,
yeah,
World 2006, and Dead or Alive 2019, because that was in his hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably putting World 2006 as number 3 on that list. I think it's really a battle. This, to me, is the peak of Dragon Kid's singles career, because he looks like a guy that on this night had this tournament, and it should have been, because, Suwa got hurt halfway through it. This should have been to crown the next UDG champion, and had Dragon Kid won, I don't think the promotion would have missed a beat at all. Had he won the title, I mean.
Yeah, and especially given the fact that the title remains vacant until the last night. They put it on Shima very clearly. I wonder if it was something where it was like, we're putting this belt on Shima because he's immediately going to become the first Dreamgate champion.
Yes, I would assume so.
We need this on him at that point. But when you look at Dragon Kid's career, he is really the icon of the promotion, and he wins a Summer Adventure Tag League, of course, with he wins that one with Eita. But by and large, you look at his history and you look at this is his big singles accomplishment, is this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely.
because he doesn't really like the weird thing, he doesn't really do a Super J Cup.
No, that was something that, because we were short on time, I didn't bring this up, but right before El Numero Uno is the 2004 Super J Cup, and it's odd because the only Toryumon guy on that show is Shima, and he's in the 6-man tag match that's like the Dream 6-man where it's him and Kenta and Minoru Tanaka. But the Super J Cup that year is missing because the lineup sucked. It's missing a Toryumon spark, and whether it would have been Dragon Kid or, Naruki Doi or Yoshino or even Taiji Ishimori, it was missing somebody, and Dragon Kid certainly would have fit the bill.
Yeah, and it's something like now, like not to veer into 2024 Dragongate, it's been something now that he is always the person, like, first and foremost. Like, I always expect, like, I'm still expecting him to show up on the All Together show. Like, Dragon Kid is going to get sent if there's a Dragongate thing. It's just who it is. And it feels like at this time, and I think part of it is that we don't talk about the first half of 2020 or 2004. This felt like the real kind of accomplishment for him because his biggest match, actually, I'm sorry, Case, I forgot my favorite Dragongate show of all time, the Mascara Contra Mascara, Absolute
That's
Mente
true.
2002.
That's true.
My favorite Dragon Kid
peak.
match.
Yeah, that's probably his peak.
But, like, that was the Blood Feud. Like, you have the Blood Feud and you have the award. So he got his Blood Feud win in 2002. And then you have in 2004, like, his actual, like, credit win, and the moment where, like, everyone in the post match comes and celebrates him in a very weird way.
Yeah, I think to put a bow on this, you have to look at the last 6 months of Toryumon, everything from December 2003 onwards. They could have had Milano as the champion. They could have done Suo versus Shima had Suo stayed healthy. They could have made Dragon Kid the champion. And instead, none of these things happen. And it feels like, and I think this is apt to say 2018, or even sometimes over the last few years where even the promotion has been strong in terms of quality, they still have been dealt a bad hand. It feels like this is all worst case scenario.
Yeah, because what does this tournament look like if Suo's hurt? Doesn't get hurt.
You would think, because I mean, I think he had won every match up until that point. You would think he would maybe be in the Mochi spot.
I wonder if that, because, like, that was the big thing about Suo. He comes back from like in 2003, and then he just wins nonstop after Kawasaki mode.
Yeah,
and it's something where that changes things. I don't think Ryo Saito really would have gone farther if he was not hurt, but this was like just the most hurt Dragongate tournament. Basically, up until King of Gate 2023 case, this was like the most hurt tournament, it felt like.
Oh my god, yeah. No, I mean, again, this year, this 2004 time period, mirrors a lot of what went wrong last year, with the June retirement and Doi failing to get over, and then you got Saito hurt, and then you got Suo hurt, and it's very similar to what the promotion was dealing with, at this time last year. And then you look at the calendar, it's like, well, 2005, everybody got healthy. A few things actually went their way instead of, worst case scenario. And they had one of the best years in company history. And that's why, to come full circle, it's why I'm so bullish on this Dead or Alive card, is it finally feels like some things took a good bounce instead of a bad bounce for this promotion.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. It's something where I'm interested to see, and not to go completely into that as we're going a little long, I'm interested to see what they do coming out of that, just as much as it felt like in a way that they kind of positioned this show a bit as a season finale. Is it going to be like a season finale feeling show for like Natural Vibes? Like it's like you can kind of see the similarities there. I did want to note before we wrap up here the post match, because it is very wild. So Dragon Kid wins, the crowd goes insane. He does, like, he's the all-time great, like, 3-count celebrate guy, Like, he, like, as soon as he does 3, like, he falls back as he always does. Immediately afterwards, the combined forces of Do Fixer and Italian Connection come out, signaling that Magnum Tokyo is back. They do a combined dance with Magnum and leaving, of course, the backflip for Dragon Kid. Magnum cuts a promo basically saying, like, you did it. You made it to this point. For this day, we are now in the Dragon Kid kingdom for one night. And everyone celebrates Dragon Kid as Magnum Tokyo, in like one of his few selfless things, puts Dragon Kid up on his shoulders, and everyone cheers him, but everyone knows Magnum's back.
Everyone knows Magnum's back. What a scary thought.
Yeah. And that is El Numero Uno 2004, guys. And do you have any other timeline notes before we wrap this up?
No, I'm really glad we did this because I'm going to spend, the rest of my weekend watching some more 2004 stuff from both pre and post split, because it has been my biggest blind spot. I had never seen this show in full before, and I would certainly not deem it essential. I stand by what I said at the top that, I think 8/30/03 to me is sort of the unofficial Toryumon finale. But this little run here from September through July, and really September 03 through all of 04, is fascinating. It is not the comfort blanket that Toryumon and Dragongate usually provide. It is the strange wilderness, at times great, at times disappointing, always very odd.
Yeah, it is one of the more interesting shows in Toryumon history. There's a part of me, like, as like a last note, knowing how big of a figure Dragon Kid is, especially for upcoming wrestlers and wrestlers that note Dragongate as a wrestling they got into because Dragongate was the thing that came to town. I wonder for like Dragon Kid fans if this night got anyone into wrestling, because there's more than enough Dragon Kid fan pro wrestlers that I feel like would have been like of like the critical age, that seeing Dragon Kid win this night or seeing Dragon Kid defeat Darkness Dragon, I wonder if those were the things that sent them to that point.
That's a great question. I'd love to know that.
Yeah, I would love to know who saw El Numero Uno, or who was in the crowd, because this was in Tokyo, and saw that. And that was the thing that we'll find out later is the thing that drove them to pro wrestling. So you do get that kind of feeling, don't you, about the show?
For sure.
But it's a really fun one, and I'm glad that we did this. Like, we were trying to figure out what to do. We had El Numero Uno written down, and I think the thing we kind of decided is that we don't talk about the Dragon Kid Kingdom, and it was time to talk about it.
No, because we largely did 2001, just passing through it in the M2K episode. I don't care about 2002. I mean, it's fine, but I don't have any connection to it. And there's other stuff in 2002 to talk about.
It's LOL Magnum win.
Yeah, and 2003 we've talked about enough, and so this is the next one, and I'm really glad we did this. So again, if it wasn't clear, this full show will be available in the episode description and at voicesofwrestling.com on the show page, and you could watch it there and enjoy it there.
Absolutely, and that is going to do it for this time in Dragongate, and in Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch for Dragongate 25, Dragon Kid Kingdom. We'll be back with you in May for the next edition of that, but we'll be back with you very soon with a special episode of Open the Voice Gate. We'll be having back Jay Church on, and we can't wait, and we'll start to look ahead towards Double or Nothing. You could follow us on Twitter at Open Voice
Double or
Gate.
Nothing or Dead or Alive?
Did I say Double or Nothing?
You did. That was very funny.
I'm going to retake that.
No. Keep it in. We're keeping this all in.
All right, we're going live with this. Well, we'll see if Jay has Double or Nothing takes.
I can guarantee he doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. But we'll be back over this weekend talking with Jay about Dragongate, Dead or Alive, and WrestleMania weekend. Like, I have a bunch of, I want to get his WrestleMania weekend takes as well. But thanks for listening. We'll be back with you next time. Take care, everyone.
My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungy AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines, and we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy every week on the Voices of Wrestling Network.